Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special Zazen Kai with the great Mary Mocine. This is a joint Zazen Kai from Scuba, Japan, and Vallejo, California. We have people sitting. I see folks in Mexico, Indonesia, uh, the Ukraine, Canada, and the United States, all joining here, and Vallejo. Hello, Vallejo.
No.
Yes. I'm just going to, I don't have to say any more about Mary. I put up information about her background. We are very honored to have her with us today, and I'm just going to turn things over. We're going to follow their procedure. I understand they sit for about 35 minutes. Then there's 10 minutes of kin hin. Then Mary's going to give a talk. But first off, Mary, would you come on? Just say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody. Can you see me? I think I'm in a good place. Is that right? Is this good enough?
Yeah, give a wave if it's good. All right. Well, Mary, I'm going to turn things over to you and just do what you
Yeah.
usually do.
We're going to sit zazen, and since we face the wall, we thought we'd have the laptop face the wall also.
Okay.
So, well, the agreement that is reading us not working, so we're going to put our shoes on and try to join it. And then we put it in like this.
So we're going to set up the lecture. So it means, let's see.
Ultimately, it's going to,
Yeah.
when Mary's doing the vows, it's going to stay back there,
Yeah.
and then it's going to come forward when she does that.
So somebody can sit up here. We're going to see. Okay. So then,
Definitely individual, or can we just, because of this, or can we just have people?
yeah, and I think once this moves, we can slide somebody. So usually people on cushions, we can fit three across.
Right, so why don't we have people sit just behind this, and once she's done with her vows, and this moves forward, and people slide forward, so we're already almost there.
Can we just slide it forward now?
We can.
Just off to the side. Maybe.
Okay.
Then we're not seeing the house. Then we're not seeing
Yes, let's go ahead. So anyone who needs a chair should go behind people on cushions, and people on cushions should go up. So let's see. There's room for somebody up there. I can sit up there if no one else wants it. Oh, yes. Yes. I'm not sure they have people on cushions though. No, I just can a chair. You're going to stay on, right? Okay, so you're going to stay there. So three chairs to go here. Just bring the whole chair and the whole cushion. So if no one's doing that chair, just leave it. You want to do some chair?
I think I am. Are you okay?
No, I'm going to sit over there.
I'm in there. Yeah. I thought I was going to sit there, but actually.
Are you sure we can get you a, do you want a support cushion? Huh? Because we can have another chair too. It's okay. So, turn that support cushion underneath, like the flat one. Yeah, just that flat cushion. Thank you.
There are more chinkos. How's that? Is that about right?
Looks good.
Okay. We do a chant to open the lecture, and unsurpassed and so on. Is that okay?
Please.
You guys, we all know a slightly different version, I think, but oh well. It's on the little book that says, the little handout, the little tiny one that says small chants frequently used at Zen Center, or some title like an unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Good morning.
Morning.
Jundo, do you usually say something else in introduction, or shall I just go?
No, please go ahead, Mary. Thank you.
So I hope that everyone has a copy of the Eihei Koso Hotsugan Mon. It's in the chant books here on page 21. This is, well, let me just say, if especially anybody here, or anybody, if I use a term that's unfamiliar, please ask about it. I don't think there's going to be a lot that's unfamiliar, but if there is, know that you're probably asking for 10 people. Sometimes people get too cool to ask. So Eihei Koso Hotsugan Mon is Eihei Dogen's vow of practice. And that's Dogen. He's the Japanese founder of our school, and he lived in the first half of the 13th century, from 1200 to 1253. And this is his statement of his intention. And so I love it, and I think it's a wonderful thing to talk about. So what I'd like to start with, though, is please let us recite it together. And to recite it means please no punctuation, if you can help it. Just smoothly, and somebody said recently, seamlessly, and try to take a breath at some place other than the punctuation or the paragraphs. And notice that's not so easy. It's not so easy to not do. But at any rate, let us chant it together. The Eihei Koso Hotsugan Mon. We vow with all beings from this life on throughout countless lives to hear the true Dharma, that upon hearing it no doubt will arise in us, nor will we lack in faith that upon meeting it we shall renounce worldly affairs and maintain the Buddha Dharma, and that in doing so the great earth and all living beings together will attain the Buddha way, although our past evil karma has greatly accumulated, indeed being the cause and condition allows us in practicing the way. May all Buddhas and ancestors who have attained the Buddha way be compassionate to us and free us from karmic effects, allowing us to practice the way without hindrance. May they share with us their compassion which fills the boundless universe with the virtue of their enlightenment and teachings. Buddhas and ancestors of old, as we in the future shall be Buddhas and ancestors, revering Buddhas and ancestors. We are one Buddha and one ancestor, awakening Bodhi mind. We are one Bodhi mind because they extend their compassion to us freely and without limit. We are able to attain Buddhahood, the attainment. Therefore, the Chan Master Lungya said, those who in past lives were not enlightened will now be enlightened in this life, save the body, which is the fruit of many lives. Before Buddhas were enlightened, they were the same as we enlightened people, exactly as those of old. Quietly explore the farthest reaches of these causes and conditions, as this practice is the exact transmission of the verified Buddha. In this way, one never fails to receive profound help from all Buddhas and ancestors, revealing and disclosing our lack of faith and practice before the Buddha. We melt away the root of transgressions by the power of our confession and repentance. This is the pure and simple color of true practice, true mind of faith, of the true body of faith. We dedicate the merit of this chanting to all beings. So I'm sorry, I noticed the international folks were not reading it. I thought that you had copies, but maybe there was a miscommunication. I don't know.
No, everyone has a copy, Mary.
Okay, well, it'd be helpful if you looked at it while we talked about it, if you have it handy. So I've been thinking about this a lot, and I have many different ways of understanding it. It keeps changing. I originally learned about this from Tenshin Reb Anderson Roshi years ago, and one of our members did a 3-week practice intensive at Green Gulch Zen Center where he teaches, and she learned about it, and she came back saying, oh, there's this wonderful thing that we chanted, and she told me, and I thought, oh, right. So now it's going to become more familiar here also, I think. What really strikes me about it today is that it's Dogen's heart. It's very sweet, and he's not usually very sweet. He's not usually. I don't know of an example. I'd be interested to hear one of Dogen making a joke. He doesn't seem to have an interest in being funny. But at any rate, this seems to me it's sweet and it's accessible. And it's just simple and direct, and I see it as Dogen's vow of practice. This is his heartfelt vow. And in that way, I find it very, very touching. It's intense, but it's sweet, and it's not scolding. And he can be scolding also. And doesn't strike me as scolding. It's just his heart speaking to us after all those years. And it starts out with a vow. Put the clock where I can see it. Starts out with a vow. We vow with all beings from this life on throughout countless lives to hear the true Dharma, that on hearing it no doubt will arise in us, nor will we lack in faith, that upon meeting it we shall renounce worldly affairs and maintain the Buddha Dharma, and that in doing so the great earth and all living beings together will attain the Buddha way. That's some vow. It's monastic. It's true. And it was written for monastics, because that's what he did. He was an abbot of a pretty large temple, now a huge temple in Japan, Eiheiji. And that's what it was meant for. It was meant for himself, I think, but also for his monks. But it's also applicable to us. And the fact that it says renounce worldly affairs does not let us off the hook. And the fact that it says on throughout countless lives can mean literally that, if that's how you believe. It could also mean, I really mean this forever. I take it seriously. And renouncing worldly affairs, we, in this lay practice, this practice in the West is a lay practice mostly. Practice here in Vallejo is a lay practice mostly. So we don't renounce all worldly affairs. We have jobs and families, hobbies. At the same time, there is a kind of renunciation that happens as you go deeper into practice. There's a kind of renunciation that happens as you walk into the door of a zendo and sit down. There's a kind of renunciation that happens when you go to a place in your home that you have hopefully been able to set aside for meditation, and you sit down and you do zazen. There's a kind of renunciation that happens when you get to work and you sit for 1 minute in your car and breathe and settle yourself. Over and over, there's a kind of renunciation that happens, letting go of worldly affairs, coming back to the center here. Sit down, get quiet, pay attention. I told some people earlier this morning. That's a renunciation of worldly affairs. So again, the fact that we're not monastics does not mean we don't do that. We do it. And I vow to do it. It's my intention to do it. And sometimes I fail. However, it is my intention to renounce worldly affairs and to practice the Buddha Dharma. And that's what Dogen is talking to us about, from his heart to our heart, from his heart to my heart. And I do mean to hear the true Dharma. Both what Dogen says, but also the true Dharma in here in my own heart. And I want to be open to it. No doubt will arise in us, nor will we lack in faith. Doesn't mean to be stupid. There's a story that from a friend of mine was going to be the head student at the Berkeley Zen Center, and there was a dinner of the people that were involved in it in some way. I can't remember. I just remember we went out to dinner, and our teacher, Mel Weitzman, was there, and it was Chinese food, and the check came with the fortune cookies. I don't know if this is universal in the Ukraine or whatever, but it's very common. And so she said, let's play a game. Usually the game is you open a fortune cookie and you read the fortune and you say, in bed. She said, no, let's do something else. Let's say your teacher. So we said, sure. She opened her fortune cookie and she read it out, and it came out being your teacher. Trust him, but keep your eyes open. So that's the kind of faith that I'm talking about. You know, not blind faith where we just say, yes, a boss, but there's a kind of opening and a kind of faith that does need to happen. I have to be able to hear the Dharma. I have to set aside my critical nature and let it in. And I have to work with, he says no doubt will arise in us. I have to work with my resistance and know my resistance in order to live my vow, which is to allow this Dharma to enter my body, mind, heart. It's not so easy. And it's important. And so that's how I understand this notion of no doubt will arise. Right? Because there is, as we say, there's the great doubt, useful doubt, and there's corrosive doubt and corrosive resistance, and that's the difficult kind that we need to work with if it afflicts us. So Dogen vows a great vow, and that's the beginning of his practice vow, his practice commitment. I vow forever to open to the Dharma and trust it and not resist it. And I would say, I vow to work with my resistance. I vow to own my resistance because it's not going away because I said so. If only. I do vow to renounce worldly affairs, and I'm not talking about that as a former monastic or somebody sitting here with robes on who is committed to belonging to the Sangha. I mean it in this little, deeply important, nitty-gritty way that I vow to let go of all of my worldly affairs and all of my attachments when I enter the Zendo. And the harder one, I vow to let go of my worldly attachments. I vow to let go of my ego attachments, my self-clinging, my insistence on my own views, and on and on. We all have our lists. There's a lot of there's a lot of overlap, I'm sure. I vow to let go of that in order to be available to the Dharma, which is not just capital D Dharma teachings of the Buddha. It's every day. It's what did you have for lunch? So how are you treating your friends? So I think I think that we can, and I do, join Dogen in this vow, in this practice vow. And that statement of intention, and you could talk about this in terms of intention, but I like the word vow because it gets your attention. And we all have all these ideas about vow. It gives a chance to let them go. Right? Vow means Catholic priest and celibacy. That's a vow. It is a vow. But I can vow deeply intending to set aside worldly affairs and self-centered affairs in my life. That's a vow. And in fact, as we practice, we discover our vow, and we're, in a sense, it's there, we uncover it. We uncover it and allow it to arise organically, and then work with that for the rest of our lives. And of course, it may change. What is your vow? It's a good question to ask yourself. What do I mean? What's the most important thing? For me, I say I want to know what is. My friend Fu Schroeder, who is the abiding abbess at Green Gulch, once answered her teacher in a ceremony called Shosan, where you ask and answer Dharma questions with the teacher at the end of a retreat. I don't remember what exactly Reb asked her, but she said, I want to know the truth. So that's her vow. And my vow it seems to me pretty much the same, only different words. So what is yours? And it's not a question to answer in a moment, and it's not a question to answer with your head. It's not something you can put some intention into it, but it has to arise organically from your gut, and that can take time. One of those things, you ask the question and then let it go. In 12-step, we say you make your best effort and let go of the result. So maybe that's a way of thinking about it. A vow. The next section I was thinking is called, it would be like a petition. Although our past evil karma, he uses that word, or maybe the translator does. Although our past evil karma has greatly accumulated. So you can react to the word evil if you want to, but that's not the point. Our past unwholesome karma, maybe not exactly mine even, but it's whatever these hindrances are they're presenting to me right here, right now. And I certainly have some responsibility for my current situation, some of which is a result of actions by me that are maybe not so, that are not skillful. I take back the maybe and the not so. So although my past unwholesome karma has greatly accumulated, indeed, being the cause and conditions of obstacles in practicing the way. Help! May all Buddhas and ancestors who have attained the Buddha way be compassionate to me and free me from karmic effects, allowing me to practice the way without hindrance. We say that hindrance arises from fear. When we chant the Heart Sutra, we say the mind is without hindrance and no fears exist. Fears often cause or underlie our hindrances. Right? Anger erupts, and if you can stop for a moment, often you'll find fear underneath it, and then maybe sadness underneath there. Who knows exactly? You have to take care of your own mishigas. You know that word's a Yiddish word, means like stew of troubles. I have to say it's disconcerting because if I look at the faces of the people in front of me on this computer, I'm not looking at them. I'm not looking into their eyes. If I look at the camera, at this little light, then I look as if I'm looking at them.
Yeah.
And to be on the receiving end of it, my experience is it feels a little odd to be on the receiving end of it when somebody's not looking at you. So I just thought if I confess, it helps. Anyway, I have difficulties. I have a shadow. I have hindrances. I have faults. We all do. Right? We're all garden variety neurotics, in my view. And it does get in my way. I said something about having a critical mind. You may have thought I was just picking that out of the air. I am not picking that out of the air. I do have a critical mind. In what's called the Enneagram system, which my friend Meili was seriously into, which is a system of analyzing personalities, she said that I'm a 1, which is a perfectionist. And I'm a 9-ish 1, and the 9 is a related thing, but 9s and 1s are anger points. So this is something that I work with, and I am aware of it, and I can own it, and I can often not impose it on others, and occasionally I do impose it on others. And then my practice is, of course, to clean up my mess, to apologize for being rude or sharp or, what was the word I used? Cranky. So I can use all the help I can get. So it seems to me that that's what this paragraph is about. One of the things, to digress a moment, one of the things I really like about Dogen is that I think he's very, in a lot of ways, he's very simple and very relevant to our time. And there's a famous section in something called the Genjo Koan. He says, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. And to study the self is to forget the self. He's talking here, too, I think, about studying the self. And I think, and Shohaku Okamura thinks so, I figure I'm in good company. He's a very well-known teacher, translator. And he's Japanese, so he can read Dogen in the original, like old Japanese. It's like us reading Beowulf or something. Anyway, I think that what Dogen was talking about was understand the self as this thing that's not graspable and not mine and not whatever. It's sort of a process or some ephemeral thing or doesn't exist. Yes. However, it's also studying this plain old nitty-gritty self with all of its hindrances and what we say usually, warts and so on, and its strengths and so on. This skin bag with whatever's going on in here, studying it, knowing it, and acknowledging it. And I think when he says this about our past evil karma has greatly accumulated, he's talking about just this self that doesn't want to get up in the morning and go sit, or that gets irritated when it feels thwarted or doesn't get its way. I could go on and on listing hindrances. I'll stop. You can supply your own, I'm sure. So I acknowledge this and I ask for help. So these Buddhas and ancestors, may they be compassionate to me and free me from karmic effects. I think that freeing doesn't happen by magic. I think that freeing happens by me sitting down and getting quiet and paying attention and noticing how when I am unkind, it hurts me and it hurts other people. Or often I'm really unkind to myself, and then that hurts me. And then if I'm acting or speaking out of that feeling yucky, I hurt other people. Right? So I want help. And I think the first step is knowing that about myself, and then being open to asking for help and being willing to receive it. And I think that's what this is about. So that I want that support, that sense of support from all these people that have gone before, that I can do this practice. I can see my attachments and I can change the gesture. I hope this is clear enough on the screen. I can change the gesture from this to this. And it doesn't stay like this, but maybe it doesn't stay like this much anymore, and it's more often about like this. You see that? I'm going from this to that to this. Making this gesture, I feel vulnerable when I do it. When I put my hand out like this, just open, a little fear arises in me. Good kind. It feels good, actually, but it is a little fear. Maybe because I've given it so much weight over the years, because I do this all the time in my lectures. So we ask for help from these Buddhas and ancestors. They were the same. Buddhas of old were as we. And in the little quote, the part in italics from Chan Master Lung Ya says, before Buddhas were enlightened, they were the same as we. Enlightened people of today are exactly as those of old. And us small b bodhisattvas in training, we're the same as they. So what Dogen is saying is, yes, you can do this. Yes, there is support for you to practice and find your heart, find your way. It's really, really, literally, practically true. It's not esoteric. It's not about somebody else. It's not about, I can't possibly become Kuan Yin because I couldn't do that entirely, always hearing all the cries of the world. I can't do that. It's not that. You practice. You practice. And this support is available to you when you open to it. when I was in Japan, Blanche Hartman Roshi led a 4-week practice period for some women years ago, 92, at Rinsoin, our Suzuki Roshi's home temple in lovely downtown Yaizu. The temple's beautiful, Yaizu not so much. And I remember I went because I thought it'd be fun and an adventure, and my friend Maylee was going and so on, so I went. And we had a one-day sitting early on, the third day or so, to kind of settle in. And as I was sitting there facing the wall, minding my own business, a vision arose, not literally seeing it, but in my mind's eye, this vision that I was sitting there and I was looking out, and there was this vast array of ancestors, Buddhas and ancestors. And there were a lot of women there too, which did my heart a lot of good. At any rate, I saw them and I suddenly thought, oh, I mean, I didn't even, there are thoughts that arise organically that are not, don't feel like they're from your brain. So this thought, the knowledge arose in me that they were supporting me and that I wasn't different from them, and that they had a hard time sometimes and their knees hurt, or great anger arose in them during Zazen, and they bashed their parents' heads in during Zazen, I confess. And all these kinds of things, whatever that they have, great fear of death arose, whatever it was, they knew it and they kept practicing and they were liberated. And they were supporting me, and I really was one of them. And that was tremendously encouraging, and I feel now, and felt then, I know that now. I can't see too much facial response, so I don't know how this is being received, but there's things that, yes, thank you, there's things that we know, in our bones, right? This intuitive knowing, you know something experientially, and then you really know it. There's all different kinds of enlightenment experiences. And I hadn't thought of that as an enlightenment experience, but in a sense it was, because it was a body experience. Then I can talk about it and give you words about it, but it was a body experience and it happened, and so I know it. So, I wanted to make sure. So I guess the last part is, it seems to me, about practice. The last part of that petition section, that second paragraph, because they extend their compassion to us freely and without limit, we're able to attain Buddhahood and let go of the attainment, which is perhaps the most important part of the whole thing. But I think that's a major thing to be aware of, that we need to be willing to accept that we're worth it, that I can receive this compassionate support, that I can offer myself this compassionate support, which is, after all, where it comes from, and that I can open to compassionate support from my Dharma brothers and sisters and my teachers. So I want to leave time for questions. I want to touch on that last paragraph, quietly explore the farthest reaches of these causes and conditions, which refers back to our past evil karma has greatly accumulated, indeed being the cause and condition of obstacles. So quietly explore the farthest reaches of these obstacles. As this practice, this exploring those hindrances, is the exact transmission of a verified Buddha. And it's not easy, I think. Sometimes it's easy, but not always. Confessing and repenting in this way, one never fails to receive profound help from all Buddhas and ancestors. And I have one more story, which is I experienced this at my second practice period at Tassajara at the monastery of the San Francisco Zen Center. I was working in the kitchen, and the Fukuten was somebody who I had a hard time with. And the Fukuten is the person responsible for working right underneath the head of the kitchen, and the one responsible for making sure that everything actually happens and the food gets made and assigning jobs and stuff like that. And I was working in the kitchen during a sesshin, during a 5-day silent retreat. And I don't remember what it was about, but we had some little spat. It wasn't, a spat is even too big a word for it, but something. And I felt bad about my part in it. I mean, it may have been that she was more responsible than I, but that wasn't the point, right? Practicing for me is, it happened, and then my job is look at what did I do? How did I act? Did I act the way, did I act as the kind of person that I want to be? Regardless of what triggered it or whose fault it was, it's never all one person's fault, and that's an article of faith with me. Even if it's 90-10, but this was not, I don't think it was 90-10. Since I've forgotten it, I can make up anything I want, I suppose. But that's not the point. The point is, I felt bad, and I worked for the next 2 or 3 days with letting go of my idea about how I was right, or how she was wrong, or how she was rude, and that's why I was rude, or all of that. And we had been studying the Heart Sutra, and there's a phrase to have an empty heart. So I was trying to get to having an empty heart, and it was the hell realm. It was the hell realm. Just immediately went to, I'd feel bad, and then immediately, da da da. You can just feel it in your body, can't you? You just know that, sort of leaning in and getting hot. And I finally, on the 4th day of a 5-day sesshin, I got to the point where I could let that go. And I went to her and I just said, about da da da, I'm sorry I was rude to you. And she didn't even know what I was talking about. But it didn't matter. I got to that point. I let go of all of my ego tentacles. I mean, not even that strings, they're tentacles. And it wasn't that I felt proud of myself, but it felt so good and so light to just stop having it be about me. It was marvelous, but it was hard. And at the end of that sesshin, there was one of these shosan things, question and answer, and the teacher leading it was my teacher, Soja Mel Weitzman. And so I was trying to figure out how to ask a question about this without going into it or naming her or anything like that. And I forget what exactly I said, but it was something like, I just had difficulty with somebody, and it was really hard to let go and get to having an empty heart. It felt like it cost a lot. And I said, does it ever get any easier? And he said, don't be stingy. So I try not to be stingy. And I think this last part, that is the guts of the practice. We irritate each other. We irritate ourselves. How do we explore that and know the harm? And in knowing the harm, we can open that hand. So it happens organically. You watch yourself suffer. You watch yourself cause other people suffering long enough. Maybe you get tired of it. And maybe you drop at least some of it. Or you, as Blanche says, you stop believing in your story quite so much. So it's easier to open the hand. I think this is a very quick summary of this teaching that is Dogen's heart. Dogen's heart of practice to us. And it seems to me really useful to keep it in mind. I do vow to renounce worldly affairs, and I do vow to practice, which means turning the finger this way. So do you have any questions? I told the people here that we would have discussion afterwards and let you folks go. So does anybody have questions? And I'm not sure, do people just raise their hands or what happens?
Well, let me just tell the procedure. If any one of our folks has a question, just wave your hands like crazy. We also have some people watching one way from home, and I'll be checking email a few times. So if you email me a question at jundotreeleaf@gmail.com, I can ask Mary the question for you.
Okay.
So, anybody have a hand to wave?
Comments?
Okay, Shingen.
First of all, thank you, Mary, and thank you, everyone at the Clearwater Zendo. I actually don't really have a question. That was actually just a wonderful talk, and it was actually very appropriate because actually yesterday I was kind of butting heads with a good friend of mine, so it was a very timely teaching to help let go of this ego of right and wrong. So really, thank you. It's wonderful to have you, and I very much enjoyed your talk.
Thank you.
For being
Yes,
patient.
I butted heads with somebody on Thursday. It's just the most recent example.
Oh, anybody else I didn't see? Sorry.
Didn't look like it. Is there anybody here that wants to make a comment or has a question?
Bryson? Anyone in Vallejo?
Yeah.
The term worldly affairs,
Uh-huh.
I see it in personal terms that we were talking about. There are a lot of things that I could include in worldly affairs, and in terms of politics, and so how to approach those kinds of things.
Yeah. So worldly, I don't know if you folks could hear that. Should I repeat that? She was asking about worldly, it says renounce worldly affairs, and there are a lot of worldly affairs that we, and I'm going to paraphrase, so tell me if I'm wrong, that we perhaps do need or want to be involved with, engaged with, such as politics, the environment, and one could go on and on. So how do you do that? How do you work with that? And I think this kind of thing comes up all the time in our practice. How do you engage in the world? How do you be political and still be practicing? And it's a difficult practice and a worthwhile practice, I think. And it's about not being attached to your view. It is not about not having a view. You see what I'm saying? It's when we get clenched, when we get self-righteous, it's one of the main uses, I think, of practice for those of us who are political is knowing the body. So you can feel it in your body when you start to lean in, when you want to fix something, and when the anger is arising. That's the time to be quiet. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be engaged. Just know when the engagement is coming from a wholesome place and when it's coming from an unwholesome place. And if you do, in a political argument, if you do lose it, then maybe you stop sooner than you used to would have, or you apologize if you need to. I thought when I went away to the monastery, I thought that I would tame myself and that I would come out and I would not be self-righteous in my politics anymore and so on. Well, I was there 4 years, 4 years, and it didn't happen. It got better, though, and I see it sooner, much sooner. And I know it. And I know that I get triggered in meetings, and so I have to pay attention to them. So it's that kind of thing. Our stuff does not go away, but our relationship with it changes, and that applies across the board with your family, politically, in arts organization, doesn't matter. Okay.
I have a question from someone at home. Ed writes, what do you do if you've made a vow and you've broken it 10 times and it is affecting, and it is affecting your life?
You make it the 11th time. I mean, we break our vows, you know. We take the precepts, right, and we vow not to kill, and you have to figure out what that means for you. For some people, it would be not eating meat. For me, it's not squishing people's spirit with my smart mouth. I mean, that's a major focus for me. Or not speaking of others' faults, not gossiping. How many of us could say that we have not gossiped in the last week or 24 hours? I'm being kind to us the last week. We break our vows. And when, you know, I don't know what kind of vow you're talking about, you know, if it is a marriage vow or a vow by, you know, I started to say a vow by an alcoholic not to drink, but, you know, the first step is I admitted I was powerless over alcohol. And then I asked for help. But those, you know, big time vows that are really deeply hurting us or other people or other people, us and other people, it's never not hurting yourself when you do that. Then maybe you really need help of a different, you need therapy, you need a 12-step program, you need something like that if it's causing deep harm. If it's a vow not to speak of others' faults, you just keep making it every time you notice, you make it. And slowly you begin to break it less often, or you stop sooner. It gets easier, but I don't know if it goes away. And that's why here we do a full moon ceremony once a month and repeat our vows. We also do a check-in. So I hope that's useful. I don't know you, and so I don't know exactly what we're talking about. Jundo, you look like you're reading.
Anyone live? We have 2 written questions, if I may, from different people.
Yes, I'm using suspects who are not. Yes, go on, I'm sorry.
Sierra says, thank you, what a wonderful talk. While I was listening intently to it, my husband came in and I was irritated with him. The resistance you speak of sneaks up constantly. I will apologize to him later. How would you suggest fostering a connection with ancestors for help? Reciting this reading, perhaps? I have trouble visualizing that, but it is a wonderful concept. I would like to feel more connected with the support Dogen is advising.
I think reciting the Ehe Kosu Hotsugan Non is not a bad idea, and also I don't know if you have any access to the various chant lists of Buddhas and ancestors. Here we chant the sort of shorter version of the men, and we chant a version of the women ancestors. And I know when we started chanting the women ancestors, I couldn't say it because I was just sobbing. And I knew that I cared a lot, but I didn't know how much until I started. When you chant, it opens you in a different way. So that seems like it would be useful. And you should talk to Jundo about it. I'm assuming that Jundo is your teacher. You should work with him about ways to do that, I think.
Anyone? Yeah, one more from home. I'll just ask quickly, if I may. I noticed that, this is from Jennifer. I noticed that in the last paragraph there are references to confession. Mm-hmm. Could you confession?
Yes.
Please, could you elaborate on what is meant by that, confession?
Well, the word we use these days is owning. But I think towards the beginning I was saying something and I said, I'm confessing. I love the word confessing because it has that sense of surrender. And the thing is, it's not surrendering to somebody. It's letting go, setting down, surrendering my weapons in this ego battle that I fight. I don't fight so much anymore as work with it, but still letting go in some way. And that's what I think what doing full bows to me is enacting with my body my vow, my commitment to letting go of self-clinging. So confessing is like owning it is in fact owning my faults. I confessed quite a bit actually to you guys, because partly my style to be my own example. I said that I had a smart mouth. I believe that I said that I was a perfectionist. I believe that I said I was an anger type. I won't go on to the list, but I don't say those things just to talk about myself. I say them for a reason, and I say them as an example of being willing to own my stuff, to be polite.
Mary, I just want to mention, as you know, none of that applies to me.
Yeah. No, I know. Well, each of us. None of these people here either, I'm sure. And people here seem to be having. Oh, yeah. Here was one. Yes, Zach.
Okay. So the last paragraph mentions faith. How do you see faith as part of practice?
Oh, I cut that out. I was going to talk about the Lotus Sutra and the faith discernment, but it's too long. Faith is another one of those words that I like because it gets your attention. You know, that we can say sometimes self-confidence or trust. There's a poem called Trust in Mind. So I need to have enough faith, enough self-confidence, enough, I don't like this phrase, but ego strength is sort of okay, to be able to take the step into the unknown or the step into saying I'm sorry. You know, there's a kind of faith in 12-step we say I went from I am a mistake to I made a mistake. There's a kind of faith involved in that, a kind of self-confidence. You try little examples, little confessions, little apologies or something like that that you need to, or just something you need to look at that you're not ready to look at. So you glance at it a little bit from the side. You know, in the Lotus Sutra, the prodigal son comes back and he winds up, his dad puts him to work in the stables shoveling shit, and he does that for a while, and eventually he gets better and better work until he can believe that he is his father's son. He doesn't recognize his father. And then at the end, his father says, this is actually all yours, this vast wealth. But he had to do his homework shoveling shit, which is another way of saying quietly explore the farthest reaches of causes and conditions. It's just American way of saying it. Is that useful? Trying to say it, because it's already 11:15. So maybe this is a good time to stop.
Okay, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It has been an honor. Thank you for letting us all intrude, and you're always an honored guest in our Sangha. And I know everybody give a Treeleaf wave for Mary. Arms up so she can see us all.
We do a closing chant, which is the Bodhisattva vows, if you'd like to join us in that.
Please.
Yeah. Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. Thank you very much, and good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good very early morning, wherever
Thank
you
you
are.
again, everybody, and I'll say good night now. Thank you very much, Mary. It was a pleasure and honor. Good
Thank
night.
you. Good night. Now.